Your your credentials, they're pretty impressive. An all-electric motorcycle, organic underwear, Jawbone, the one laptop per child. These are just a sampling of some of the projects you've been involved with. And what I sort of want to ask you to start is, what's worth doing? What general qualities do you look for in a project before you decide to put your name on it, before you decide to sort of get behind it 100%?
Often it's when everybody says it's impossible. But I have a mantra and I use it a lot. And it's not just like a nice sentence or something that kind of sounds right on a business website. It's really something that I believe at the core, which is that good design really accelerates the adoption of new ideas. And I've always, actually, when I started, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to, write fiction. I wanted to be about ideas. Everything I wanted to do in my life was about some new ideas, some things that were exciting to me. And later, I realized that through design, I could do that as well. And to me, there's so many important things that are happening in this century and at the end of the last century. And I feel like every time these things have been adopted in our lives, every time people got it, it's because a great product, a great experience, a great company has come about and demonstrated that this idea is important. That this idea is actually not something crazy or impossible, something that actually we're going to recalibrate our lives on, and everything will change, from now on.
Well, let's talk about one particular product. John Maeda had mentioned that design is it's kind of all about process. I'm really curious to talk about the August Smartlock, which is one of your most recent inventions and products. I'd like to hear about the genesis of that idea. Like, how was it born? What was the initial thought, or how was it proposed to you?
Well, when we started to talk about it about 2.5 years ago, I think, with my co-founder Jason Johnson, there were a number of things happening at the same time. I was discovering the use of new types of technologies such as Bluetooth LE, which we were integrating in wearables, for example, which made a huge difference in how wearables became connected. And at the same time, I was also looking at the idiosyncrasies of our modern lives when we have all these services coming to our homes. We have we have a lot of things that we're able to manage very quickly, very efficiently, and yet we all spend time and a lot of anxieties around our keys. Where are they? Do I have them with me? Is the door locked? Shuffling through bags, looking at them, looking for them in cars. It just seemed like incongruous that we were, still bothered by, little sharp pieces of metal that, kind of poke us in our pockets.
The way our iPhones do.
Yeah, well, they're not as sharp lately, but it seemed it seemed ripe for something new, especially when I started looking at the history, and it looks like the standard key we're using is about 200 years old, but really the principle of opening a door with a key is about 2,000 years old.
Wow. So the whole idea of the home is like the sacred place. It's the last bastion of true privacy, and now we're sort of asking people to adopt a technology that puts that on the web, that puts that out, into the world, into the cloud. What sort of adoption barriers did you anticipate, and how did you deal with those issues when you were coming up with this design?
So as a designer, for me, the most important part is the experience. And in the home, technology really isn't something that people want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that the technology that you install into a place like the home is usually loved by the person who put it in.
Yeah.
Usually the techie in the home.
Mhm.
The rest of the family hates it. Right? I mean, we've all experienced that. So yeah, this is different. I mean, the IoT, the world that we're seeing happening today, is one where everybody has to be able to use it. Everyone has to have. It has to delight everyone, or it's not going to make it in there, right? It has to be beautiful. It has to be simple. It has to be successful in a sense. One of the ways I thought that we could have a winning formula, because if we could help people adapt it on the existing infrastructure that's there, not require them to change their doors or change the entire hardware, you know, in their home.
No big magnetic interface or
Right.
something that was completely different.
I just realized I forgot the Apple,
Oh, you have one.
the Apple demo, the POS. But one very important part is that,
This.
you know, in your house, you've already given keys away to people. And we want that same key to work with our system, meaning you have a couple of keys out there, you know, grandma's got a key, you know, just she can still use it. She can still get in, and so can you. So making it a retrofit, not a full replacement product, was what was going to make it easy to adopt, easy for people to install and use.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Internet of Things, because that's sort of one of the main reasons we're up here to talk. The Internet of Things is something that I think all of us are going to be more and more engaged with as the months and years go on. But that arena presents a whole new realm for designers too. Designers need a lot more skills than they needed in the past. What challenges do you think the Internet of Things, the growth of that, you know, that idea and reality is going to give to design teams? What new skill sets will they need going forward?
Well, I think I've always believed that, but we did live through a decade where, you know, some people thought design was just one thing versus the other. You know, some design was just purely digital, some design was purely physical with products and industrial design. Some design was purely about brand. And you know, today it's really about these three things. It's about all of it. You can't solve a problem just with just one of those disciplines, one of those tools.
Mhm. Do you have multiple? I mean, you have an engineering background as well.
I don't have an engineering background, but we do end up solving a lot of engineering problems.
Really.
We create a few as well, right?
course.
Because you know, again, as I said, this is, you know, you want to solve it in an elegant way, but mostly we want to be a part of solving it all the way through. But we have different teams, but they're so used to constantly brainstorming and not having that traditional language barrier that happens when somebody in graphic design speaks to an industrial designer who speaks to a digital person. You really have to have people work together across those disciplines for a few years until they're really comfortable and you see them bloom.
Mhm. I'm just curious. I don't know how much time we have left. Does anybody? Our timekeepers seem to have vanished. Okay, I'll just assume we're going to go on. I'd like to ask you a question that it's kind of weird. I'd like to hear about one of your failures, something that you thought was a really good design but didn't necessarily catch on, or maybe you really haven't had any. But I think we all have a few things in that world.
Of course, there's many. I have short-term memory though, but no, I mean there are things that have yet to be, you know, to be successful in a sense. I mean, there's a company that I think that's doing something great called Brigo, and it's a robot kind of coffee store, which you know, I think you know, maybe a little bit early in the cycle. I mean, one of the really important things I've realized, and one of the reasons, you know, one of the ways in which we choose our projects is this the right time, right? It has to be early enough that you have 80% of people telling you, I don't know that I want it, because next year that 80% will be 60, you know, 40, 20. So it needs to be early enough for that. But it can't be so early that the technology is expensive or that there are sort of significant barriers of entry. You really need the role of design is to you have to see that we're going to be able to push through that initial resistance. And I always think about if 6 years ago we were talking here and I had said in 6 years you won't really need a car, you'll be entering somebody's private vehicle and they'll be taking you to the airport, somebody you've never met, you would be like, you're crazy. I like my taxis. I like my limos. Why do I need such a company, right? And today, Uber is the kind of behavior that we're very comfortable with.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It's sort of like it reminds me of hitchhiking in a way from my youth.
Right. Right.
Except then all I had to do was buy a tank of gas, and it's 29 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your favorite objects? Do you collect objects? Do you have I know that John, I was talking to him the other day, and he told me he's collected fortunes from fortune cookies. I wonder if there's any specific object that you have in your collection or something that you like to sort of stockpile.
I used to collect a lot of Polaroid cameras, and I certainly have my share of like 70s experimental design, kind of furniture. What I find very interesting then is the world of furniture was really sociological in a sense. It was a demonstration that the world was changing. So a lot of the designers were very sort of engaged politically and wanted to challenge, the way we live, like who's in the kitchen and where is the kitchen and why, what's the traditional bedroom. They were really challenging the sort of traditional environment. And a lot of the sort of crazy, interesting furniture from the 60s and 70s is something that I'm attracted to because they're incredibly wonderful failed experiments in a sense. They maybe made 10 or 100, but that's where it ended.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how much time we have left. Just about the time. I'm going to ask you one last question anyway because it's been on my mind. I'm just curious to know what you're reading, what sort of books you're reading now, or if you use books as a form of inspiration.
So I read more than I've ever read before, because I read a lot on the go. I read a lot on devices, and I'm sort of an avid reader, but there's a couple of books in French that I'm reading now that people wouldn't know about. I like a lot of essays about culture. I read those things from Dave Hickey and others. I'm really interested at that intersection. In a way, I feel like the art world is very similar to the sort of the technology visionaries that we enjoy. It tends to sort of reveal new phenomenons, new frustrations. For example, things that John talked about, which is we're in love with that phone that's in our pocket, with that smart device that's in our pocket, but it's also highly disruptive of it's you can feel the sort of level of frustration and social upheaval in your personal life around it, right? And so there is something fundamentally wrong about it, but you really have to read, you really have to look at the work of artists, and you have to really look at what technologists on the edge of inventing the next thing are doing to kind of to start getting excited about what's next.
Well, thanks, Yves. Thanks very much. I want to thank all of you too, and just say that we're going to have a little break now, and I'd like to invite you to join us in the foyer for some snacks, and we'll continue the conversation soon.
Thank you.